good evening, everyone, and welcome to May's episode of our Dochas Webinar series. Before we get started, I would just like to acknowledge that I am hosting this webinar from the lands of the Camaragal people of the Aurora Nation. And I would also like to acknowledge the lands that you are watching this webinar from, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So tonight we are exploring the topic of relationships as part of our Dochas Webinar series. The Dochas Webinar series are usually on the first Monday of each month, and they each explore a different topic relating to mental health and well-being. Past episodes can be found on our YouTube channel, and you can watch those back at your leisure. But we are tonight looking at relationships and specifically romantic relationships with a partner. And as an expat, often we can feel added pressures and stresses put on ourselves whilst in a relationship. So we wanted to create a safe space where we could talk about the issues that we face in terms of boundaries, communication, and expectations. And I'm delighted to welcome Katie O'Donoghue, originally from County Cork. Katie is the resident relationship coach at the online counselling service, the Indigo Project, host of the self-help podcast, Self-Explained, and creator of Reclamation, a newly launched self-paced inner child program. She coaches a mix of singles and individuals in relationships who are looking to rewire their patterns so they can rewire their relationships. Katie, it is an absolute pleasure to have you with us this evening, so thank you so much for joining us. Let's start by you telling us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be a relationship coach.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Una, for the introduction. And I'm excited to be diving into all things relationships tonight. If you can't tell by the Irish accent about what I'm about to say, like, understand me, just ask me to slow down because my Cork accent is quite fast at times. But I became a relationship coach. So it's a bit of a complex story, but we're going to simplify it down just for time. But I basically grew up in a home where there was a dysfunctional family system. So I had elements of addiction, abuse, and neglect within the home, but that's not to shame or blame anyone. It's just the hard facts of what I grew up in. And there were obviously good times as well. But I didn't realize until I was in my adulthood life about how that early experience could actually shape the way that I relate to people in my adulthood life. So I had a traumatic experience in 2017. And I went to see a psychologist for body image issues. But as I became more conscious, I started to kind of question the ways that I was showing up on a day-to-day basis, specifically when it came to the relationship with myself, which is what a lot of people will understand, that even though at times you might feel like it's your external environment, what it does really come down to is the patterns within you. So I continued along on my self-healing journey, and I still do the healing work today. But in the pandemic, I moved away to Australia. I decided to upskill on top of my first university degree in UCC, which I'm very, very grateful for. But I decided to throw myself into personal development, understand anxiety through a diploma so that I could teach other people how to manage their anxieties. I also did a coaching certificate, neuro-linguistic programming, and I'm back studying psychology as well so that I can get that trust factor with clients and eventually go on to be potentially more than a relationship coach. So that's kind of how my journey started. I'm not sure if that's enough insights or not, but I'm trying to just give a full sweep of everything.
Absolutely. No, I think that's lovely that it was, you know, when we talk about relationships, sometimes we forget about the relationship we have with ourselves. So I think it's lovely that that's what started you on your journey to this work. So as a relationship coach, obviously you're working with individuals and couples regularly. What are most common issues, you know, or concerns that people are presenting themselves to you with?
I mean, regardless of what people come to me for, a lot of the time it does come down to communication skills. Maybe often holding back from communicating with their partner because of several fears a lot of the time, or because they just don't know how to communicate without coming across in a negative way. So whether that's pointing fingers, elements of shame or blame or judgment or criticism towards their partner. So kind of doesn't really matter what the problem is. It's just about how can we get you to a position where you can communicate and feel safe to communicate what is coming up for you. So addressing expectations within a relationship is often where we go to, or assumptions, because if you're not communicating to your partner, you have all these stories and assumptions within your mind that can actually end up creating disconnection within the relationship because you're not on the same page at the end of the day.
So do you think that two people with two very different communication styles, can they relearn, and can they come to a point where they can work together?
Yeah, for sure. It is quite confronting sometimes because it requires an element of self-reflection and self-awareness. So it's not necessarily to say that doing the work is about you saying, my partner did this or they're doing this wrong in the relationship, but rather, what are your communication patterns that could be enabling an unhealthy dynamic? And how can we change them? And often you can do that through what is called inner child work. So kind of exploring how you learned to communicate in your earlier years, how people related to you, and what you were praised or punished for in terms of communicating or expressing yourself. So just to give an example of this, because I like to give examples so people can kind of understand the connection. Let's just say you can't express maybe sadness or anger as an adult. Maybe it's something that you just really struggle with and you don't really know why. Maybe it's because you fear that someone's going to meet you with a negative response even. But if you trace that pattern back, there could be an experience, and it might not necessarily be within the home. It could be in school where you had a very critical teacher who actually did not support you when you faced a challenge in an exam where you were crying maybe. And so that was quite traumatic for you. And it taught you not to express sadness as you grew up because it was unsafe, so to say. So that's just kind of how the kind of wounds manifest in your adulthood, which is why it's important to kind of go back and explore those early experiences, as daunting as it may be. I always like to reassure people that it can be actually really healing to really understand yourself and understand the why or the root cause behind that behavior within you. But when it comes to kind of navigating communication styles with your partner, by understanding how you communicate, you'll be able to understand your partner a lot of the time, because you'll know that it's not necessarily to do with you, the way that they're showing up, but actually to do with how they were brought up and the patterns that they learned from a very young age. But communication is key.
Well, I think you said something really important there, that you know, you have to engage in the work, you know, that it is, you have to invest in it. And I suppose when two people present themselves, obviously that's the first step, and they're showing up for the relationship, and they're, you know, addressing that there is a problem. But do both people have to be willing to put in, you know, the same amount of work and to do that inner self-reflection? I could imagine that, and I don't know, but, you know, are women more likely to, you know, take that on than men, or what has been your experience?
I mean, that's a tricky question to answer because I've seen both sides of it. What I am noticing is that there is actually a lot more men coming to coaching or coming to therapy to kind of understand why or how they can show up in a better way for their partner.
Okay.
how they can be more emotionally available at times, because there is a culture of toxic masculinity out there, which teaches men not to express themselves, and that's a sign of weakness. So I guess to answer your question, I think I'm going a little off track now. It is important, I would say, for two people to take responsibility for their own wounds, for their own pain, so that they're not projecting it onto their partner. Can two people, work together if it's only one-sided? I'm not sure if in the long term that would be a functional relationship, because it can create over-functioning in one person, and over-functioning is disempowering to both people at the end of the day. So I'm of the belief that it's important for everyone to take responsibility for their past traumas, so that they're not carrying it forward or projecting it or spilling it out onto the people around them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great point, Katie. One of the kind of, I suppose, buzzwords that I hear often when talking about relationships is love languages. Can you explain a bit about what love languages are?
I'm going to hold my hands up and say, for anyone who thinks I know the ins and outs of it, I do not. I only learned about this in the last couple of years. What I will say is a very helpful question to ask yourself is, what makes you feel loved in a relationship? And how can you communicate that to your partner so that they're showing you love in a way that makes you feel appreciated or makes you feel good? Again, to take it another step deeper, go back to your early childhood. What was it in your earlier years that actually made you feel really appreciated or really loved as a child? What was the behaviors in other people? Was it that they looked at you when they spoke to you? Was it that they had a loving touch when you were feeling upset? Was it that they were making you nourishing food and they were sitting down to connect with you? Sometimes it's not just the most obvious things. It's kind of look a little deeper and a little closer as to what it is specifically about that memory or about that person that communicated to you you were loved or you deserved to be loved. The important thing to remember here is, if you don't really have an element of self-love, that's a key factor in a relationship that you need to kind of consider working on. Because if you deep down don't believe you are lovable or that you deserve love, what can happen is you'll actually accept behaviors that reconfirm that back to you. So kind of toxic relationships can happen as a result of that belief within you that you don't deserve to be loved for who you are. What do you think?
Yeah, and we've actually just had a question come in, and I think it relates really quite well to this, in terms of, what if you cannot pinpoint a memory within your childhood, or there's trauma there that you're not aware of, or there's wounds there that you don't know are wounds?
Sometimes it's not necessarily a memory, but maybe a feeling. So I can't really go into the ins and outs of this because I'm not a psychologist, and I can't really explain why you may not have a memory. But sometimes it's not that it's the memory, it's the feeling that you had, the kind of generalized feeling within your childhood of whether it's maybe not feeling accepted or feeling like you were a burden versus feeling lovable or feeling supported. So maybe it's not necessarily that you need to work with the mind, but maybe you need to work with the body, or work with both in conjunction with each other, so that you're becoming conscious of what it is that you need to work through. I hope that answers that question. I'm not sure.
Well, I think it's really important. It's a key piece of work that, I think we all could do with, completing, and I don't know what your advice would be to someone kind of just beginning on that journey. I mean, can they do some work themselves, or is it about working with someone else?
I would say, and I can only go off what I see, it's often very helpful to have someone who can support you and act as a mirror. Especially if you feel like you've gone through something that was quite traumatic, it's important that you do seek professional help so that you're not further traumatizing yourself or maybe triggering yourself where it's a bit too much or emotionally challenging to you and you're getting into a worse position than where you were before you started becoming curious. I always suggest, recommend like having a book. If you know what it is that you're struggling with, reading a book about that area can sometimes be super helpful or a starting point. But again, just be conscious that you may trigger yourself in reading books, and just to have an action plan of how to support yourself if you get a little bit upset or a little bit angry on the inside. Cope with your emotions in a healthy way, whether that's reaching out to a friend, getting professional support, journaling your thoughts down, listening to a guided meditation. I suggest all these different things because you got to do a bit of trial and error, what makes you feel safe and what makes you feel supported.
Okay. So in terms of two people then, going back to a relationship, in terms of two people then, how can we align ourselves so that each other's needs are being met and being cared for?
I mean, everyone has needs, is what I want to say, first of all, for anyone that may be watching this back or on the call and thinking, I don't have needs or I don't know what my needs are. You do have needs. It's just about becoming clear as to what they are, first of all, so that you can have a conversation with your partner about your relationship needs. Now, what's important here is that you're not depending on your partner to be the sole source of your need, because that's what creates a codependent relationship. So being conscious that you can meet all of your needs first and foremost, and that everyone else is just there to help you meet them in another way if you feel like you need to meet it outside of yourself. So think of your friendship groups, even think beyond your partner. You have family members. You can connect with community groups to get a certain need met, whether it's for connection or to feel a sense of belonging, for example. So even in a relationship, don't think that it's just you and your partner to meet your needs either. This is why you diversify your circles and why you expand and surround yourself with different groups so that different needs are being met within your life personally. Another thing to kind of be wary of when meeting your needs is, are you meeting them in a healthy way, in a way that makes you feel good? So let's just say if you had a need for safety, first of all, what makes you feel safe by yourself? And then what do you need to communicate to your partner so that you're feeling safe within the relationship? So let's just say if you're facing conflict, for example, and you realize that them raising their voice at you makes you feel a little bit triggered and unsafe. What do you need to communicate to your partner, maybe when things are going really well, so that that situation isn't happening, or so that there's a safety signal where you can basically say, I'm not ready to talk about this while we're both emotionally reactive or triggered. What are your thoughts on it?
I think the theory is great, but I would just wonder whether, knowing your needs and being aware of your needs and, feeling very confident in them, I would imagine takes quite a lot of self-esteem and, self-belief and self-assuredness. So I wonder, how would someone manage if they had lost themselves a little bit and they were, wondering, what are their needs? Maybe they've lost that focus. How can they, get back to trusting themselves?
I mean, we learn about our needs in childhood, so maybe not in a conscious way, but often what you prioritize as an adult is based on whether the need was met or unmet in your childhood years. I always say to kind of become curious as to what was role modeled to you in terms of needs. So whether that was observing mom or dad or people around you practicing self-care, or taking time away from work, for example, when they needed a rest. Think about those basic needs. So rest, safety, love, connection. You can even Google up online a list of needs is what I would say. And then think about ways that you can meet that need specifically. There's tons of resources on the internet if you feel like you don't want to go to someone to understand your needs. But you can self-sabotage meeting your needs as well. So if you have a desire for connection, for example, you might self-sabotage by not speaking up in your relationship, and that creates disconnection. So it's really important to kind of understand so many different things. I'm probably going really complex now, but everything clicks together is what I want to communicate. And starting with you is where it is in a relationship.
I also just want to say to everyone, if anyone has any questions throughout the chat, please feel free to put them into the chat box and we'll address them as we go along, but there also will be some time at the end for more questions. Katie, you mentioned there codependency. What does that look like in a relationship?
So there's no formal definition from what I can see out in the internet. So this is based on a lot of resources is what I want to say before I say anything. But codependency is basically when you become reliant on someone as the sole source, like I said a while ago, for a certain need. So whether that's an emotional need, a financial need, a physical need, a mental need, it's that you depend on them to meet that need alone. Now, codependency is a bit of a manifestation. So again, this is a learned behavior in your earlier years. Pretty much most things that you struggle with can be traced back, but not necessarily to your family home. So think beyond your family home. Think about movies that you watched, podcasts, books, basically anything that you exposed yourself to. That can create an imprint on you, especially in your 0 to 7. Maybe even beyond 0 to 7, because your self-concept is still developing into your teen years. So if anyone doesn't know what self-concept is, it's kind of like your self-perception. So how you feel about yourself, also the way you kind of view the world, and the feedback you get from the world and how that affects you as well. So I'm going off on a tangent again, back to codependency. I like to describe it in terms of the inner child. So it's kind of like if you grew up in a home where you didn't know you had needs, or you had to neglect your own needs because maybe a primary caregiver was dependent on you for some reason or another. Usually it can happen within a home where there's an addiction or some sort of mental health disorder, where they feel like they have to depend on their kids to feel a certain way. A little bit of parentification can happen as well at times, where you actually end up becoming the caregiver to your primary caregivers instead of the child. But again, this is not parent blame or shame, or caregiver parent blame or shame. It's just about exploring those relationships. So when you think of the inner child, again, back to this, if you grew up in a home where you learned to neglect your needs, it's likely that you abandon yourself as an adult. So you don't pay attention to your feelings or to what it is that you need, and you give it up in favor of meeting someone else's needs. The other side of this is maybe someone who grew up in a home where they had all their needs met and they never learned how to meet the needs themselves. So they're dependent on someone else to meet their needs for them. And that's kind of them abandoning their inner child too. So it's kind of like this abandonment wound on the inside, really. But how to identify it? Basically, if you feel like you can't trust yourself, if you can't meet your own needs, if you tend to people please to keep someone around, that can often be a side of codependency. If you feel like you have a desire to fix people or to rescue people or to save people, or you need to be needed by someone, or as I like to say, the I need you to need me phrase. They're often kind of indications of codependency or problems with speaking up within your relationship because you're afraid that the relationship is going to break down and that's going to result in the loss. So there's so many other ways to identify codependency. It's pretty complex, but I always encourage having a bit of self-education is key for being able to identify these challenges within relationships.
Yeah. And for anyone who, is listening tonight or is watching back, and, a lot of that is resonating with them, what would be, just one sort of, what would be the first step for someone, who has started to identify some codependency patterns?
I always say in any healing journey, it's acceptance, accepting that there is a challenge that you're facing, or accepting that you're in pain even. But I say working on yourself, because to become to be a healthy and functioning individual and separate from codependency requires you to understand your values, understand your boundaries, understand how to meet your own needs, how to practice self-care. Recognize that just like you have that privilege, the other person has that same privilege too, because you're two adults in a relationship. And that's the important thing here, is it's two adults, which means that unless you are in need of extra support for maybe a personal issue or a health reason, that you should be able to look after yourself and to just have other people come along to help you along the way, but not to be that sole source, like I say.
Yes.
A lot of women, I would say, overfunction in relationships because that's a lot to do with societal beliefs at times, going back from years and years and years ago. If you think about gender roles and the role of a woman versus the role of a man, which can actually serve as the basis for codependency at times. But again, just challenge your biases, challenge your beliefs. Why do you do what you do? Or why do you feel like you don't have needs, or like you can't communicate your needs? So I hope this is answering the question.
Yes, yes, very much so. I suppose being an expat and not having immediate family around us, sometimes in relationships, and I know this has been the case for myself, if I, have an argument with my partner, I'm quite reluctant to talk to my, mom about it, because I feel like she would really worry about me, knowing that was going on. So we really rely on our friendships over here, to be that sort of sounding board when we want to talk to each other about what's going on. So what advice would you give to someone who is aware that the friend is going through a difficult time in their relationship?
Yeah, I think everyone has probably gone through this situation of, ooh, maybe I shouldn't have said that to X person, or ooh, they're going to change the way they think about this person now. Now I can't go to them again because they have this perception. I always encourage an element of mindfulness or consciousness when you think about who to go to when you're facing a difficulty. Now, the importance of this is because if you are someone who only talks about your challenges to other people, then it's likely that they'll have a negative perception of the relationship or of the individual to begin with. So sometimes going to a neutral source is the best option that you could do for yourself. And I mean that just based on what I see in sessions or what I've gone through myself, is that you can actually end up traumatizing yourself sometimes if you go to someone and you're met with a negative response.
Okay.
So on the other side of this, if you are the friend that they're coming to you with the challenge, the best thing you could do is to just be there and be accepting, be acknowledging of their experience and really validate how they feel. So try and resist the criticism or the judgment or any sort of negative response that you may feel triggered within you because of your own perceptions or past experiences. So asking them, what can I do to support you? How are you feeling? Or even saying that must be really challenging for you. I'd love to know what I can do to help you feel a certain way. So to help you feel supported, to help you feel safe. Even, normalizing the idea of going to someone can help a lot too, because there's a lot of stigma out there that you can't go and see someone if you're in conflict with your partner, or if you're not in the full-on crisis mode, so to say.
Yes, yes.
But again, education, understanding what is unloving or unhealthy behavior can often help you to identify it really quick and to get the support that you need, so that you're not facing the challenge again. So I think that's probably the best thing to do, is to just be acknowledging, accepting, and validating and supportive, and to park your emotions aside, because it's not really about you, it's about your friend that's in need.
Yeah. And I think sometimes when we see a friend who is hurting or in pain, the immediate sometimes reaction can be to maybe lay blame with the partner because they're not your friend, and this person has caused pain or hurt to my friend. So I think there would be a bit of work to be done there in terms of relearning how we communicate with our friends. Yeah, I think that.
Yeah, I think it's probably a natural response. I'm going to say I've done it in the past when I've had friends come to me until I decided to learn the ins and outs of what was supportive versus unsupportive. But it's a natural reaction. We're humans, we're going to want to protect those closest to us. And how do we protect them? We just, paint the other person as the villain. But again, it's two people in a relationship. That's not to justify abusive behaviors. I want to say that's not to say do not let people slide past that, because they have to acknowledge their responsibilities in those situations. But definitely resisting the blame game, because that gets no one anywhere in a relationship, in a friendship, or in work, whatever it is.
Yeah. Just want to circle back before we move on. There was a question that came in there. Is there an opposite to codependency, being too independent in a relationship?
Yes, is what I want to say. Obviously, the ideal in a relationship is interdependency. I think I said that right. But yes, you can be too self-sufficient. This is often, and sometimes, not all the time, a survival mechanism. So perhaps you learn to be too independent in a relationship because depending on someone was unsafe for you in your earlier years. And so the way that you learned to survive was to become super self-sufficient. But if that pattern isn't serving you as an adult, I would suggest becoming curious as to where it developed, what was happening, who was there, what were your beliefs at the time? Why did you believe that you needed to be self-sufficient through those moments? And that can often help you to identify the pattern. And then obviously to overcome it, it's about, testing the waters, maybe being more open to receiving if you feel like you're closed off to receiving in a relationship, or being more giving if you feel like you struggle to give, because that's going to create some sort of intimate relationship or trigger a bit of vulnerability within you. So that's what I like to encourage, is just to try the opposite of what you're used to sometimes, and to see how that feels within you.
Okay, that sounds good. So in terms of then relationships that are, not going so well, do you think that some people are reluctant to leave a relationship that isn't working for them because of, pressures regarding, the age they might be, or, where they are in their life, and they have a feeling that, oh, I'm never going to meet anyone again, and this was my shot? Do you think that that kind of thought process holds some people back from leaving a relationship that isn't working for them?
I mean, if you're to think about what this really comes down to, a lot of the time it's the narrative. So the stories that you've created in your mind, whether it's based off fear or beliefs. For anyone that's here and they think I'm going back to the past quite a lot, this is my core modality that I use in inner child work. So that's why I keep going back to those early experiences that you've had that have shaped those beliefs, that have shaped those fears. I do see a lot of people thinking, you know, the one, or I'm never going to have someone as good as them. And it's kind of like, you know, that's created from somewhere. That's a very disempowering belief to have, because it's boxing you in and keeping you stuck in what may not be a healthy relationship, or what may be a really challenging breakup where you can't really let go of the person that you were with. So even reframing that story and addressing where those thoughts come from and those beliefs come from, I can tell you myself, they came from fantasy movies that most of us have grown up watching that create those narratives. Take a closer look at what you've exposed yourself to, and what are the roles, the relationship dynamics within them, within those movies. That can be often where the story started, and it's just you've grown up and had conversations or had certain experiences, or had your partner even telling you, you know, kind of gaslighting you that you're not going to have better than them. And so they've filled your head with all of these stories. Maybe you've been gaslighting yourself, and that's what's keeping you stuck. And it's kind of like, what do we need to take a closer look at? What is the disempowering self-talk, and how can we empower you so that you're able to see the opportunity ahead of you instead of going back to the past where you're staying stuck?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's not easy. It wouldn't, you know, it's not an easy thing to do, but empowering, very self-empowering. So following on from that, I suppose, then what are some of the other relationship myths, or, you know, things that we've been led to believe that we're going to, you know, demystify tonight?
I'm going to say, before I go into this, if anyone wants to write any into the chat box, I do welcome that. If anything has resonated with you so far, you're welcome to ask questions. But I guess the most obvious one is that happy couples don't fight, or they don't argue.
Oh my God.
And it's kind of like they do. It's just they know how to navigate through those situations and how to diffuse things early on before letting it hit that downward spiral where it's just blaming and shaming and judgment and criticism. So that is a complete myth. You're going to have disagreements in a relationship, and that's okay, because you're not supposed to be the same person. You're not supposed to have the same identity. You're two separate human beings with two sets of beliefs, two sets of patterns. And it's just about, again, communication that will actually create a lot of happiness within a relationship. So that's my first one. That you need big romantic gestures in a relationship to be happy, and that's a sign of true love. I mean, maybe for some people, but what is going to keep the relationship stable and what's going to keep it loving in the long term? It's the consistency of the smaller acts. So whether that's making a promise and following through on the promise, whether it's you know, acts of service, cooking a homemade meal for your partner because that's what makes them feel loved. Those kind of smaller acts or smaller gestures are actually what kind of creates that healthy dynamic and helps two people to feel loved within the relationship over time. Sometimes the big gesture could be a little bit of a red flag if it's too early on. So just be careful of that.
Yeah. And I know in terms of, you know, social media, and we see these relationships played out, and oh, I've got the best boyfriend and he did this for me. I'm thinking, oh, this is so unrealistic, you know. This is just too much. But then again, we only see what they want us to see, you know. So yeah, I think that's
it's very important, I will say, if you're on social media and looking at relationship content, to just be aware of how you're feeling that day, because your perception is very much going to influence how you perceive the content in social media. So if you see a happy couple in your post breakup, of course, that's going to be triggering for you because you're not feeling 100% on the inside. So just be mindful of what you're consuming on social media, especially if you're not feeling the best that day to choose. There's a lot of questions coming in. I'm like, will I go to the questions or will I continue with the myths?
We'll just jump in really quickly because there's a lovely comment here. I am nearly 30 years married and we need to take stock every day of how we connect and respect all of the boundaries. Diffusal of the plentiful disagreements happens all the time. And yes, nice gestures are so important. Well, that's lovely.
Yay, I'm going to celebrate that. That's amazing.
And then one question, and this is a really good one. Is the metaphor that someone is the flower and someone is the gardener in a relationship a myth?
Ooh, I feel like my initial perception of this, and I haven't heard it before, but that to me says a little bit of power play. Just because I feel like the gardener does a lot of the work a lot of the time. And the flower just is nurtured. That's my honest perception of it, but I haven't heard that metaphor before. Now I'm like, I need to write that down and become curious on it. Had you thoughts, Una?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, a flower is there to grow, but also, you know, to be something to be admired. But then I guess the gardener gets, you know, he or she puts in the work to get the flower to grow and to where it's supposed to be. So I'm not sure I really understand why someone would describe a relationship that way in the first place, but it's an interesting one.
I mean, I've heard that you grow your own garden and that everyone has their own garden that they need to pull the weeds out of and water the flowers so that everything's, you know, healthy and growing and nurtured. But should you be in the same garden? I don't know.
one to look into further, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Another big myth that I hear as well is that sex is the most important thing in a relationship.
Okay.
Which it isn't, if I'm being honest. A lot of the time I see people and it's communication or quality time, being listened to, being acknowledged. And, you know, while sex is important, it's not the most important thing in the relationship. Levels of intimacy, different levels of intimacy is the way to go. So whether that's taking baths together or cuddling on the couch, holding hands, like the different forms of connection in a physical way. I see Christine has a question.
And one thing that I've personally noticed, and I heard someone talking about it the other day as well on a podcast I was listening to, that in a relationship, our needs can change and our love languages can all change. So what may have been true when you first got together may not be true anymore for, you know, either one of you. You know, really important to be able to, you know, stand by that and say, you know, I feel differently about this, or, you know, that physical contact for me isn't as important as spending quality time with you, and sharing that with your partner and give them an opportunity to respond and be able to, you know, allow them to say how their needs may have or have not changed. So that was, I remember hearing and thinking, so that's what's happened. My needs have changed. Yeah, that was good. So how important is communication within a relationship, or how each person deals with conflict?
I'm going to say it's the number one thing to keep a relationship functioning in a healthy way. Because a lot of the time when you think of conflict, is that people aren't really understanding what's going on within their partner, which comes down to communication. So whether it's trying to speak over each other, which comes down to a little bit of power play, or trying to be seen or trying to be heard or trying to be understood in a way that isn't serving the relationship. So that's what I'm noticing is a lot of people have communication challenges more than anything else, whether it's feeling disconnected because of a fear that's holding them back from speaking up, or whether it's not being able to handle conflict because their partner never listens to them. And so they feel like they're always going into fight mode and they can't calm themselves down. A lot of it comes down to those patterns. Again, what you were exposed to and what you learned growing up over the years of how conflict was handled, of how people communicated about elements of pain, emotions, love, about the not so rosy things in life, and understanding what your communication style is. So I know there's 4 main ones. So it's passive aggressive, and assertive are the kind of 4 communication styles. So if you can understand what your communication style is, that will often help a huge amount with elements of conflict then. I can say personally, I've had a conversation with my partner where I've communicated that I tend to shut down and to go silent when facing conflict, because I'm afraid that if I say the wrong thing, it's going to result in conflict. And so even communicating that to him has actually brought us a whole lot closer, because he understands why I'm showing up in a certain way. And, you know, even me doing the opposite to him, the way he shows up in the face of conflict, something really helpful. And it's not to say that you're supposed to be a therapist to your partner, but again, if you think about when you're in conflict or having communication challenges, you're very much in that trauma response. So fight, flight, fawn, freeze. I think that's the 4. But kind of trying to find your calm. If you feel like your partner is becoming very emotionally reactive, taking a few breaths and trying to signal to them that it's safe, you know, or letting them to kind of regulate their own emotions by observing that you're not becoming reactive. Even saying when you are having miscommunication or disagreements, a technique that's really helpful is just asking them what else, and keep saying what else until they get everything off their chest. Then you can reverse the technique so that you feel heard and listened to, and you get everything off your chest, and then take time apart to let the emotions die down and to really just have a think about what you need to communicate after you both listened to each other. So that's a really effective tool. And then come back and communicate when you're not reactive or in that trauma response. Again, I think I've gone off tangent.
Oh, I think that's a lovely piece of advice. I think that's a lovely piece of advice, Katie, I do. Okay, so look, what about for anyone who's not in a relationship and feels that they might like to be in one, or, you know, maybe they're just recently single and wondering how to navigate that scene? And what advice would you give to anyone?
First and foremost, I always encourage healing your pain. So that was created by your past partner, because again, going back to what I said at the start of the call, if you don't heal it, you're going to carry it forward, or it's going to create some sort of destructive behavior within you. So it's important to really kind of face the pain that was created and to grieve what you lost in the relationship too, before deciding to date someone else. It's also important to become curious as to why you're dating again. Is it motivated by a fear, or is it motivated by a desire? Is it the fact that you want to find a potential life partner? You know, what is motivating that choice? Why are you dating someone again? What are you looking for when you're dating someone? what makes you feel loved, what didn't work so well versus what did work well in the last relationship, so that you understand what you don't want in the next relationship, what you do want in the next relationship. Again, super self-reflective and being self-aware of how you're feeling when you're dating as well. So are you feeling good in those first early couple of dates, or are you feeling a little bit like, ooh, I'm not sure, I'm getting mixed signals? Communication again in that case with the other person is key. See if you are in alignment with what you both want, levels of commitment, potential future desires. If you feel like that's something you want to get clarity on, are they casually dating and you're looking for something serious, is what I mean. Yeah. That's super important to address when you first go back out on the dating scene, because if you don't, again, the assumptions that go on, that's usually where the pain comes about, because you're misaligned.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And for anyone who, might be feeling a bit, that they've been on the scene for a while and they don't seem to be meeting, the person that they want to spend some time with in a substantial way. Any words of hope?
I guess if you feel like you're doing the same thing all the time, maybe you need to change up your environment. So maybe it's understanding what your interests are and finding a club where you feel like someone that might have similar interests to you is going to be hanging out in.
Yes.
I don't mean a nightclub, by the way. I mean like a club, like an interest, a hobby.
Yeah.
Other than that, maybe it's that you need to take a look at your beliefs. If you feel like you're still not attracting what it is that you want into your life, maybe you need to turn inwards and see what beliefs are actually motivating your choices. So, common thing that I see is people reject nice people sometimes, and then they don't know why they find this emotionally unavailable partner. And it's kind of like taking a look at what your norms are. Your relationship blueprint, like I say, created way back in your earlier years because you learned to accept certain behaviors and reject certain behaviors based on your experiences in those very early formative years. So
that's a great piece of work. So I suppose for anyone who is listening tonight or watching it back and they've come looking for some clarity or even just for some solace from a difficult situation that they might be in, what words of kindness or support would you share with them to help them through this difficult time?
What I would like to say is a lot of the time we think we're on our own going through our struggles, but I'm noticing more and more that actually everyone's going through a lot of the similar wounds and pain. I guess because we often feel a lot of shame around what we go through. What can be really helpful is to kind of accept that it's not that you are a bad person or that there's something wrong with you, but that you just went through a challenging situation where maybe you made a mistake, and that's okay. You're not supposed to be perfect. Relationships are messy. Life is messy, which means that actually you can be messy too sometimes. And sometimes you just need to accept that mess. But what I would say is don't be afraid to reach out if you are going through something challenging. Sometimes all you need is someone who really gets what you're going through, someone that can validate your experiences and can help you see what you need to see so that you can move forward, or someone that can help you feel what you need to heal so that you can move forward. So just know you're not alone. Everyone has their struggles, but your power is in choosing to heal and in choosing to put yourself first if you never have before.
Well, I think that's a really good way of looking at it. I suppose that, if for anyone in a difficult situation, often you can feel like, I need to fix this. What can I do to repair this relationship? When really, if you bring the power back to yourself and say, what can I do for me? Or what can I learn about myself? Then, I suppose takes a bit of that pressure off, feeling like you need to solve anything. So I think that's a lovely way to look at it. Well, that was really nice. I really enjoyed that chat, and I hope everyone else did. And I would love to hear from anyone. Please feel free to pop your microphone on if you'd like to ask a question, or you can pop it into the chat. I have just included some links to Katie's website and also podcast, which is really nice to listen to on a walk, or so yeah, I'd love to hear if anyone has anything they'd like to put to Katie.
There's no such thing as an irrelevant question. If anyone's holding back, it's okay to ask what you need to ask if you feel like there's a little bit of fear coming up.
And also, if anyone wants to ask it anonymously, you can just send the question to me and it will come up in the group chat.
Come on, someone must have a question.
Here we go. Any advice for long distance relationships? Good question, actually. Yeah.
Ooh, this is a very broad question. I guess, my question back would be, what specifically is it that you're looking for support with? Is it maintaining connection? Is it feeling close to each other? Is it whether to stay, whether to go? It's very hard for me to give advice on a very general question, but I guess, if you're in a long distance relationship, maybe taking a look at what is and isn't working for you is where you need to start, and seeing what feels good and what doesn't feel good. Circling back to your needs, often if you feel energized and if you feel good, that's a sign that your needs are being adequately met by yourself and, with the support of other people. If you're feeling depleted or exhausted, then that's a sign that maybe you need to take a look at what needs are being neglected or ignored. How to maintain connection. So I've never been through the experience is what I want to say, but in a long distance relationship, take a look at your boundaries. Is there potential to maybe look at travel between one another, having a balance between travel? Maybe it's about, having conversations with each other on a regular basis. If so, through what kind of form of communication? Is it phone calls? Is it Zoom calls? Is it text messages? Maybe even a really nice way to create something more intimate is by letter writing. Going back to kind of older forms of creating intimacy, which can be really, really nice, is to write a letter, a surprise letter, maybe it's a one-sided thing and you surprise them with letter writing. But if you're feeling like connection within the relationship is maybe not what you would like it to be, how else can you get that need met outside of the relationship? Or is there something that you need to communicate to your partner for maybe the long distance side of it to be something else?
I know I've been in a long distance relationship situation, not for the entirety of the relationship, but it was just a part of it. And one thing that was really, really important is planning when you were going to see each other again. Like, it wasn't left hanging, we'll do this, and we'll see you whenever. It was very much like, let's plan out exactly when we're going to see each other again, so that I wasn't, wondering, I wonder when it's going to be, or, I knew what that timetable looked like and I could look forward to it, and then I could plan my own time accordingly. So that was really important. So, yeah, that's probably the one thing I took away from it.
And I agree, it's important to have an element of clarity, especially when it's a long distance relationship, because obviously it's the lack of clarity for a lot of people that creates the anxieties or the doubt, and they can often be addressed just by communicating about, again, boundaries and what feels good or what feels right in the relationship.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any questions?
Well, look, Katie's contact details, you obviously have some contact details on your website, Katie. Maybe if someone had any follow-up questions, they might be able to send you an email or something, or get in touch with you that way. But if not tonight, well, I would just like to thank you so much for your time and for chatting with us. It was just really nice to have a very open conversation about it. I think, as you said, we need to do more of it, and we need to, be willing to share that everything, isn't always, happy families. Sometimes, we go through difficult situations. So thanks so much for sharing that with us, Katie, and I hope you all enjoyed it, and good night.
Thank you, everyone. It was lovely to connect with everyone on the call and to meet you all.
Thanks.